What's going on, everyone? My name is SiahZ and welcome back to our newly updated Shatter Concoction Pathfinder build. Now this build feels a ton better to play. We have made really good significant changes. We're now hitting upwards of 10 million DPS per second, destroying a 33 million health Zesh, clearing juiced T16 breaches now with screen-wide clears from our heralds, and overall the build just feels a ton better to play. I think you guys are really going to like the changes, but before we get into it, if you guys are enjoying the build, guys, and you're liking what I'm doing on my channel, if you consider hitting that like and subscribe button, that currently is the best way to support me, and it really does help with the YouTube algorithm. I should also be streaming live right now on YouTube and Twitch. The link for those will be in the description as well as the comment section of the video. All right, let's get straight into it. So the first thing we're going to get into is the gear. So we're still running the Widowhail Crude Bow. It's just a really good bow that increases basically the bonuses gained from our quiver by a lot, which means if we get like a plus level quiver, we'll get a lot more levels into our Shattering Concoction, which if you don't know, the more levels in the Shattering Concoction, the better damage it will do, since it has a flat added basically cool damage to the skill. So leveling and scaling that with more levels gives a lot more flat added cold. But trying to get a 270% on your Widowhail will mean that our quiver can get an extra level, so that's why we try to roll that. You can throw also Spirit Soul Cores on if you want to get more Spirit Reserves. This way you can throw in like Wind Dancer, Ghost Dance, and stuff like that. For our quiver, we're looking for a +2 level to all projectile quiver. Try to get like cold damage on it if you can, crit chance, crit damage, anything like that is really good. Do not roll projectile speed on it. Projectile speed is good in a sense, but it really kind of works our Eye of Winter since we're manually casting it now, and it just makes the projectile go too quick. So on bosses, we don't really get that max stacks of critical weakness. So try not to roll increased projectile speed. Plus, with the brand new patch, the increased damage to bow skills do not apply to Shatter Concoctions anymore. So go ahead and just roll that stat off as well. And then, like I said, if you can roll, like Dex is really nice as well, since we get a lot more Dex out of the quiver since we have Widowhail. And this way we can throw on more int nodes on the tree to get to a higher int value. We're also running Azir's Golden Circlet. This basically just gives a % of our max life as extra maximum energy shield. Adds a lot of energy shield overall to the build. You can get one corrupted with Spirit's really good, but overall this adds a lot of survivability to the build, and that's why we run it in this instance. For our body armor, we're running the Expert Wax Jacket. It's a really good evasion and energy shield base, which allows us to get both for the build to have a decent evade chance, plus have high ES for Grim Feast. But we're running that, looking for Spirit, just keeping res cap, and if you can roll like Dex or Int on it is an added bonus. For our gloves, we're running the Hands of Wisdom and Action Gloves. This adds a ton of DPS to the overall build. So we're going to get 1 to 10 lightning damage to attacks per 10 intelligence, and 3% increased attack speed per 25 dex. So we have a lot of attack speed and a good amount of intelligence, so we're getting a lot of stuff added overall to the build. And like I said, it just adds a lot of DPS. If you can get one corrupted where damage penetrates cold resistance is even better, but overall, just get these gloves as soon as you can, because you will definitely see an increase in the build. For the boots, we're just running high ES based boots, just looking for that 35% increased move speed, keeping res, and then just trying to roll life on it to get as much life out of it as possible, so we have a good life and ES pool to play with. Going into our jewelry, running double unset ring just to get additional skill slots, so we can run stuff like Wind Dancer, Ghost Dance, stuff like that. So that's why we have double unset rings, just trying to roll cold damage to attacks on them while keeping the res pull. And then since we're running Dex on our quiver, we can just run int on one of the rings, and then on the other ring we can kind of roll that int roll off, trying to look for like life, keeping res cap and stuff like that, while still rolling good like flat added damage. Another thing to say, since we're running the Herald tech where Herald of Thunder and Ice will chain explode, as you've seen in the beginning showcase, try to roll some good added flat lightning damage to attacks. Since we have a lot of cold, we need some lightning damage to actually proc our Herald of Thunder, so this way we can chain to Herald of Ice, so just keep that in mind when buying gear. Also, if you can get mana per enemy killed on one piece of your gear, whether that be your ring, your quiver, anything like that, try to get it like 15 to 20 mana per enemy killed. This will basically fully solve mana issues while mapping. For our amulet, we're running a Bloodstone amulet. If you can get like a lunar or solar base, it'll be even better in this instance, but we're just running it trying to get like max energy shield, increase max energy shield on it, and then try to get high spirit, as well as obviously level to all projectile skills. If you can get like a +3, that's amazing, and then just try to roll like crit damage or crit chance on it as well. For the Anoint that we're running Doomsayer. It just gives our heralds a lot more area of effect and damage, which really does help with the clear of the build. For the belt, we're running a utility belt, but like a fine belt would be better in this instance, but still any really good belt with like reses, trying to get chaos res where you can on your gear to get high chaos resistance, and then like I said, trying to keep res cap and stuff like that while rolling like life on your belt is what we're really looking for here. The soul cores that we're running in the build, like I said, was just spirit ones, so we can have all of our other reserves in it. But if you don't want to run stuff like that and you want to have like a lower spirit version of the build, you could drop these and add like either the crit damage ones or increase damage with elemental runes. And then obviously on our other ones, we're just trying to go for like chaos resistance to get higher chaos res, and then I threw an all res in here just so we can get to that res cap. For our back bar, we're basically just running a random bow, so this way we can have just a quiver in there, just so we can use it to basically swap into our ball lightning warp tech to have shocked ground on bosses to get more damage out of the build. Now that that's covered, we can get into the skills of the build. So we're running Shattering Concoction, obviously is our main source of DPS. We're going to be supporting that with Scatter Shot. This way it can kind of shock a little more projectiles. It does lower the damage of the build significantly, but obviously we can hit more than one time since we're shotgunning AoEs, so overall adds more DPS. Then we're running Martial Tempo for more attack speed, into Cold Mastery because, like I said, the more levels on the build, the higher the overall DPS will be. That's why we scale more levels when we can. Super Critical for more crit damage because we have a really good crit chance base, so we're just scaling a lot of crit damage bonus. And then Cold Infusion to get more attack damage as cold, which adds a lot more DPS to the overall skill. Running Hypothermia to lower their cold resistance. We're supporting that with Cursed Ground. It just makes it into a AoE base basically on the ground. So when it pops, if enemies come in, they'll be cursed with Hypothermia. So then we're running that with Heightened Curse to have an increased effect of it. So this way it will reduce the resistances even further. And then Ritualistic Curse to basically just have a bigger area of effect. Then we're running our Lightning Warp Ball Lightning tech. So in Lightning Warp, we have Persistence to have more skill effect duration on our shocked ground, as well as Overcharge to have a bigger magnitude of our shock. And then we run Ball Lightning with Acceleration to have more speed on it. So as you can see in this instance, we can cast it, teleport on our Ball Lightning, and then we have all this shocked ground where if enemies come in, they'll 100% be shocked, kind of like our Hypothermia. And then this way we get a lot more DPS when we're in our bossing section of the build. Now when we're manually casting Eye of Winter, the reason for this is it frees up some other slots to throw in stuff, for example like Voltaic Mark and cast on Freeze and stuff like that, and it really does help while clearing to proc to shock enemies to get a lot more DPS out of the build. But basically Eye of Winter, we're supporting that with Deceleration to get less projectile speed, and like I said in the gear section, we actually want to have less projectile speed on this skill, and stacking more projectile speed kind of works it because we want it to be traveling slow as possible to get max stacks on an enemy. And as you can see, since it goes pretty quick, some bosses we can't get max stacks, and that severely kind of borks the DPS that we're doing. So, but we want to run the acceleration with Unleash. This just gives it seals, so this way we can cast more than one. It just helps get to that max stacks quickly and more consistently. And then we're running Arcane Tempo to have more cast speed on the skill. Or we're having cast on Freeze with Voltaic Mark. Like I said, it's just really nice for bossing. We don't have to cast it. Plus, it really does help when clearing because it does that AoE like shock explosion. That is a good chance of shocking enemies, which will chain into Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice. But we're supporting that with Impetus to gain more energy to cast the skill. Then we're doing energy retention to have a chance to refund half the energy when we do proc the skill. And then Inspiration to have less cost of actually proccing the skill. Then we're getting into our Herald tech. We're running Glaciation, more freeze build up. Ambush to have more crit chance against enemies that are on full life, and since we're off screening, this does help it do a lot more DPS and crit. Then we're running Ice Bite to have more attack damage as cold when it kills a frozen enemy, which it mostly always does when these two proc into each other. And then we have Long Shot to do more attack damage because the projectiles are obviously off screening, so this way it'll do a lot more DPS overall. Now the reason why we're running stuff like Glaciation and Ice Bite and stuff like that into Herald of Thunder is because Herald of Thunder can't shock but it can freeze, and then Herald of Ice can't freeze but it can shock. So they can do each other's respective ailments, and this just allows it to chain into each other. So we go in, you know, we'll proc Herald of Thunder, that'll call on the lightning bolts, which usually freezes enemies, and then that'll explode, and then that'll chain it to Herald of Ice, which usually will explode, shocking enemies, and then we kill them, and we'll go back into Herald of Thunder, and it's just kind of like an infinite loop going on here. So that's why we do that. But Herald of Ice, we're running Lightning Infusion again to give it more lightning damage to shock, Conduction to have more chance of shocking, Enervate to get more lightning damage when it kills the shocked enemy, and then Magnified Effect to have more AoE overlapping for that chain clear. Then for Grim Feast, we're just running it to basically overcharge our ES to have more overall. So this doubles what we have. So since we have a 2k base, we'll basically get to about 4k, 4200 or so on. So that's why we have this. It's just a lot better when mapping, and it does improve the survivability of the build by a lot. Then we're running Alchemist Boon. This just gives flash charges per second. It's really mandatory for the build since the Shattering Concoction skill goes off our flash charges. It really helps sustain, especially in bossing and clearing and stuff like that. So this is a must skill that we have to have, so that's why we run it. We're throwing Clarity in here just because we can fit it in, and we just get more mana regen to help with the bossing section of the build. And then we get into basically our double unset ring, like extra skills. So there's a few things you can do with this. Right now I'm running blink. It's just really nice to have, especially when clearing like T16 breaches and other stuff. Since we don't have a whole lot of movement speed, it allows us to blink around the map and really get to different areas a lot faster. But if you don't want to run blink and you are finding yourself maybe wanting to have more survivability, you can drop blink, throw that out, throw in ghost dance, and you can run wind dancer and ghost dance. This will give you a lot more evasion and obviously give you a lot of energy shield back because we have a good amount of evasion pool once we actually do get hit. So this does improve the survivability of the build by quite a bit. And running this, we have 65% chance to evade with a 1600 life pull and a 2100 ES pull base without Grim Feast. So it definitely does give more survivability, but obviously blink is just such a nice necessity. So that's why I kind of run it over these other two. But if you want to have, like I said, more survivability than me, you would run Wind Dancer and Ghost Dance. Now on to the tree section of the build, since we got the gear and skill section out of the way. For our Ascendancy, we're still taking the same nodes, going into obviously Shattering Concoction to get the skill. Then we're going to be going into Connected Chemistry for more flash charges, into Traveler's Wisdom to just get 5 passive skill points, which is huge on the tree to grab all the extra stuff. And then we're grabbing Enduring Elixirs. This way our flash effects are not removed when our unreserved life is filled, which is really dope because we can go into Eternal Youth, which basically our flash apply to our ES pool. And this basically allows us to kind of overfill and then queue almost our life flask, which will be up, that 3 or 4 seconds that it says. This way we can go into Cooked and get an additional 50% increased critical damage bonus during any flash effect. And since this, like I said, keeps going on, we can basically just pop our life flask when mobbing and bossing and get a lot more DPS out of the build because of it. But like I said, we're just basically passing down into Vow Wounds, going into the Master Fletching cluster to get more increased bonuses from our quiver, which allows us to get that another level out of our quiver with this compared with a 270% Widow Hail Bow. Obviously we go down into Cooked, but obviously don't take this if you don't have Enduring Elixirs yet. Then we're going to come down and we're going into Catalyst, into this Jewel socket to get more DPS out of the build, because Jewels do add a lot of DPS. Going into Standard Deliver just gives a lot more DPS in the bossing section, since we're going to be standing on enemies because we freeze them like instantly. Then we're taking Maiming Strike to have that increased attack damage, and the chance on maim is kind of nice. And then we're basically weapon swapping, so anything green you see is on our back bar. We're just going in to get more magnitude of shocks, so we have a bigger DPS pull against bossing. But we're coming down and taking Acceleration because that move speed and skill speed is just too good not to give up. And then we're going to take Falcon Dive. It's really good to get that increased attack speed per accuracy rating. It gives us a little bit more. And then obviously the nodes preceding up to it is a lot of increased crit chance. So that's the reason why we take that. Then we're going to be coming up and taking the whole crit cluster on the side. So like Heartbreaking is increased crit damage bonus. Heart Stopping is increased crit chance. Plus the plus 10 intelligence and plus 10 strength is nice. But then Struck Through is a 1% more chance to crit added to the base, which is huge. From there, we'll be going into Coming Calamity. Since we are running Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice, we get a lot more cold and lightning damage increase. And then one of the changes on the build is we're now going into this evasion cluster, specifically enhanced reflexes for increased evasion, plus the increased dexterity is pretty nice. And then Bestial Skin is 100% increased evasion rating from our body armor, gives a lot more evasion rating overall to the build and ups the survivability by a lot. Then we're coming down and going into Flurry. This gives a lot of increased damage with unarmed attacks, and since our Shattering Concoction counts as unarmed, we can go into it and take full advantage of that. We're still taking Throat Seeker. 60% increased crit damage bonus is just too huge and adds so much DPS to the build, there's no reason not to take. Then we're going to be coming up and going to the left into Eternal Youth. Like I said, just allows us to queue our life flask to add a lot more DPS since we are able to take full effect of Cooked. Then we're actually coming in to take Dynamism. This gives us 40% increased damage if we triggered a skill recently, which mobbing we always are because we're proccing our Voltaic Mark, and in bossing obviously we're proccing Voltaic Mark, so we just get a lot of increased damage, which is really nice. It does add a lot of DPS to the build. Then we're coming in and actually taking now Spectral Ward. There's a lot of maximum energy shield per evasion rating on our body armor, which obviously we're running a hybrid evasion rating / ES pull body armor, so we're getting even more ES out of it, which definitely is really nice, and there's no reason not to take these nodes here. Then obviously we're coming down and we're taking this whole crit cluster, so True Strike is going to add a lot of crit chance and stuff like that, plus it gives dex. For the Jugulars, a lot of increased critical damage bonus, as well as int, which is nice. And then these nodes over here, the damage on criticals and deadly force, give increased damage if we've dealt a crit in the past 8 seconds, which we are going to do about 70% increased damage if we've critted recently, which is absolutely massive. Then we're going to be taking these 2 points up here to get to this jewel socket. We have the points to do it, so instead of taking this one, we have like a leftover point in the tree, so we might as well take these 2 for increased crit damage bonus, plus we still get the actual jewel socket. And I'll go over all the jewels at the end of the tree section. From there, we're going up and we're going to take Thin Ice. We just get a lot of increased damage with hits against frozen enemies, which we always have. Then we're going to grab Patient Barrier because 60% increased max ES shield is absolutely massive, and there's no reason not to take this node. Coming over, and we're actually going to go up and we're taking Glaciation for more damage penetration on cold res. Plus the increased effect of cold exposure is really nice for the build, since Shattering Concoction does just naturally inflict it. And then Endless Blizzards is another level to all cold skills, which obviously Shattering Concoction is, so it adds a lot more overall DPS to the build. On our weapon set 2, we're going to be going up and grabbing Power Conduction, just because it adds more magnitude of shock to inflict, which gives it, you know, a higher shock percentage on the boss, which adds more overall DPS. Now for the jewels section, we're going to be looking for jewels that increase our critical damage bonus. If we can get like crit damage, attack damage, projectile damage, increased damage with bows, anything like that's going to be really good. You can also get ones with a mixture of those, and increased bonuses gained from equipped quiver is even better, but those can be pretty expensive. But basically that's all we're looking there. The 2 that you see with like the radius on it, this one over here is a Time Lost Emerald. It basically just affects the notable passives and range. So we have here, we'll get 10% increased crit damage, 1% attack speed, and 6% increased bonuses gained from our equipped quiver. So since we throw it in here, it'll take effect through True Strike and for the Jugular. And then the one up here that we're doing is actually against the darkness. Now this gives 4% of damage as extra lightning damage, and this is really nice because that allows us to get a lot of extra lightning damage to the build, which allows us to shock with Shattering Concoction and proc Herald of Thunder, which will chain into Herald of Ice. So it just allows it to proc those 2 a lot more, so that's why I run in here. So that's it for the build. Overall, it's a ton of fun. You know, we're doing like 10 million DPS with it. We're clearing absolutely amazing now, especially against T16 juice breaches with our Herald tech, full screen wiping now, and you know, basically with one Shattering Concoction throw. Just feels overall a lot better. Survivability has went up, and it just feels a ton of fun to play. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Obviously, if you guys do enjoy the build guides and you're liking what I'm doing on the channel, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, as it helps out the channel immensely, and it really does help with the YouTube algorithm. I should also be live on Twitch and YouTube right now. The link for that will be in the description, as well as the comment section of this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.